Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to what will be, I hope, a very entertaining match indeed, courtesy of Game of Tanks 123 here. Now there's two notable things right away about this game. One is that he is top tier in 357 matchmaking in a platoon, although the matchmaker has also put another top tier platoon in, so it's made it nice and even. And the other is that it's Himmelsdorf, and both of those are quite handy for this tank because it's not the zippiest medium, and so with most of the map, apart from the hill obviously, which is where he's going now, being comparatively flat, well, being totally flat in fact, it's going to make his mobility about as good as it can be. And of course, with the matchmaking being as it is, his armour is also going to be really quite effective against most of the enemy team. So he's come here, he's got one allied medium tank and an artillery as well, but he's not going to fully commit, he's just going to have a little look-see. Now this doesn't have good enough gun depression to sit here and really use this position, but he basically wants to know what's going to be here before he commits, and as it turns out, it's the enemy Progetto 46. If he tries to push forwards into that, he's going to lose a big chunk of health. And because he doesn't really know what's behind them, and because he's only got this tier 6 for company, he decides he's going to go and help out his allies, because while he's been coming up here, they've made a big push up the 4 line. Now, there were a lot of tanks along that D-line street there, but they just apparently did not position themselves to even spot those enemy tanks storming up the 4 line. And so they've just pushed right on through, and now his platoon mate in the IS-3, who was one of those people not really in a position to spot these tanks advancing, he's now being put under serious pressure. The good news is though that the enemy IS-3 is here, so the enemy platoon didn't stick together, and once they take him out, well, that's the enemy top tier heavy out of the way. But that Progetto is still on the hill. That is going to be a problem. So that's the IS-3 down. The enemy team has lost some tanks, but they've lost a couple more. And we're only 2.5 minutes into this. So it's not looking great right now. Half the team's dead, and they have died in a very rapid pace of time. So although there's still a fair few lower tiers that Game of Tanks has to face, which, you know, with this number of hit points and this amount of armour is not a bad position, it's still not great. They still might just overwhelm him with numbers, so he's got to be smart here, and you will see in this game generally some very smart plays. So he takes out the VK, who isn't really a threat, but rather than, you know, just drive past and leave him free to shoot at his rear, he eliminates him and then goes after the 1375, who, despite using premium ammo, just cannot pen his frontal armour. And he was very deliberately keeping his front to that tank the entire time. Unfortunately, when he comes out, he also then takes some shots in the rear from the Progetto, who is still on the hill. For some reason, we didn't hear the second shot, but there is apparently, I think it's still an issue, certainly with 102, an issue with sometimes hits not actually registering as far as the game's sound engine is concerned. So it did happen, but you just had to be paying attention to the on-screen indicators rather than actually listening out for it. So it's him, the Su-152, an artillery, and his IS-3 ally, who by this point is pretty low health. The enemy team is fairly beat up as well though. The Progetto is still up on the hill, still presumably full health, which might be a problem. There's also the 12T, but they are considerably lower health at this point, so they at least can be taken out with one shot, potentially. Now clearly there's something on the cap, but he's been spotted incoming, so they've run off the cap, whatever they were. Progetto meanwhile has come down off the hill and is going to kill his IS-3 ally, so he's now alone. This is 1 versus 6 at this point. But it's doable. Given the circumstances, it's definitely doable. He just can't afford to be complacent. So, takes one in the rear from the 12T, but does get the one-shot kill, so that's very, very useful. He's only lost well, it's still 250 more health, but, well, could have been worse. And then it comes around the corner into the Progetto, takes another hit, but for some reason the Progetto only gets 2 shots at him. Well, only 2 that I counted. So, with that threat gone, it's just tier 6s left, and at this point his frontal armour, even at this range, is more than able to cope with them. And he absolutely knows that his best armour is at his front, because this thing, you know, if you're unaware, it's got a rather better frontal plate than the T-54. So when you get to be top tier like this, it's really very bouncy. The turret as well is really very bouncy. So he's not letting these tanks get too close. He's keeping his best armour forwards and tanking a fair bit of damage in the process. 7 kills, 3,000 damage done, and all that's left is 2 artillery. So this is a little bit tricky. Both of those arties could potentially, if they are lucky, hit him with 1 shot. He will probably have to hit them with 2 shots, even if he's using his HE shells, which he's only got a small supply of. You'll also note, and I'll point out at this stage, and oh, well, there's one of the artillery, he's got a lot of APCR in this, but he has been exclusively using AP up until the point where he's needed to use some HE shells. And I'm guessing that's because, you know, he expects to see a lot of tier 10s, and that's why the APCR is in the first slot. So that's 1 artillery down, but we know exactly where the other one was, at least for a moment, because the cap indicator went off again. Now this remaining artillery is a fast one, the Lorraine 155, so it's got pretty much as good mobility as he has, and if he comes round the corner face first and this artillery gets to shotgun him, well, that could be nasty. So figuring that he's come from the hill and that he has gone through the cap and run off to set an ambush somewhere, he makes his way down through the centre, cautiously comes back up to the cap, but there is absolutely no sign of it. The alternative is, of course, that he's just run all the way back to his own cap to try and defend, but who knows? As I say, it's a fast artillery, and this isn't a big map. He could be pretty much anywhere by this point. Game of Tanks' guess that he was coming out of the west side was clearly not correct, so at this point he could have whizzed all the way back down the 8 line, or it could even have just wiggled down the middle. Maybe he's even gone up the hill. Who knows? Although that would be a bit of an odd thing to do. But as it turns out, it's what he did do. And now he's coming back down the hill, and although that was a pretty close miss at this point, yeah, there we go. There's the carry, there's the Pools medal. Not quite the Pools medal, the... oh, it's 9 kills now. I was going to say Radley-Walters. No, he's already got his Radley-Walters. But still, there's the win anyway. So that was, what was that? Pascucci's, Radley-Walters, he got Kolobanov's, Top Gun, Steel Wall, and a high caliber, nearly 4k damage, and an absolute unquestionable carry. And it was quite a smartly played carry as well. Now his teammate in the IS-3 did almost as much damage, so absolutely couldn't have done it without him. As for the rest of the team, well, you can see how many people had 0 damage there, so that was quite a lackluster performance. But on the enemy side, it was pretty much the same case. It was the Progetto that had the majority of the damage. So it was a really, really close game, and it could have gone against him. It could have been a loss, potentially. It was definitely, even in the end there, that 1 versus 1, it was definitely not in the favour of that artillery, but still, they could have done it, potentially, if they'd gotten a bit lucky, or if they'd set up in an area and managed to get an ambush off. But as it was, I can't quite figure out why they'd gone up the hill and then were coming down again on this side. But that turned out to be a bit of a fatal mistake, because they were just fully out in the open, zooming down that slope at the point where Game of Tanks spotted them. And that was it at that point. The snapshot was quite close, even so, but not nearly close enough. And so that was that. So that was a lot of medals, really. It was quite a lot of medals, and if he'd gotten 1 more kill, it would have even been a Pools medal to go along with the rest instead of the Radley-Walters. But even so, I think that was a fairly impressive result. So hopefully you enjoyed this quite quick, intense game. If you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.